All right, what's up everyone? Last one of the year, the last juice of 2020. And I think it's gonna be the best one, guys. So let's dive on in. If you're new to this channel, guys, this is what I do. I'll do I don't wanna really call it a recap because it's really not a recap of the tournament. What it is kind of more of a learning experience over a 5 to 7 day period of being on the water. To me, that's the best way to really understand fishing, right? It's kind of good sometimes to figure them out in a day, but in reality, we want to be able to figure them out every day, right? As everything changes constantly, we always want to be able to figure out how to catch fish, because figuring them out one day is great, but figuring them out for multiple days in a row really gets in tune. You really start to understand things. That way, when you come up with these scenarios again, you're able to, like, oh man, you know, go back in history and go, yeah, I remember when this happened, this is how I adjusted. And so it helps you adjust on the fly quicker. It helps you understand what's really going on with the fish, the lakes, the pressure, the weather. This is kind of what I figured out in these videos. So let's dive on in. Guys, please subscribe. Man, this is basically might be the last video of the year for me. I started this a year ago. I really wasn't expecting to be where I'm at now. I didn't have any of these ideas. I didn't really know how to communicate sometimes the stuff that I was learning, you know, and how to get it to y'all, how y'all would maybe understand. And man, it's been huge. Y'all have really been able to like latch on and figure out what I'm trying to do. And hopefully y'all are getting a lot from this. So always, you know, subscribe, let me know, drop some comments, tell me what y'all think. Let's get on into Lay Lake. I wasn't really that excited to go down to Lay Lake, not to fish, not for the fishing reason. I thought it was going to be a good tournament. It's just, man, it's just been a tough year, and it's just a lot of pressure, and it's just been a grind. And at times, sometimes when you're not doing as good as you think you do, you kind of get away from your strengths or things that you really want to do. So I went down here with one thing in mind: fish the grass. And I was going to throw a swim jig, maybe a frog, flip. And that was it. Like, I wasn't gonna do anything else. And that's pretty much what I did when I got down here. And even on day 2, it's pretty much what I did. But I quickly realized it wasn't that great in the grass. You could catch some fish, and I thought that's the way to win it, like catch really big ones, or a chance to win it, definitely a top 10. But I was like, man, I could see after day 2, day 1 was really good at practice. It was cloudy, rainy. I got bites. I had some big ones. I had some miss it, so that bothered me. And I didn't have enough bites to where I'm like, man, this is like the perfect day to catch them. It's gonna get colder, and I just didn't feel like it was really, I just didn't feel like it was a way to catch fish for 3 days. So on about day 2 or day 2 of practice, Hallman called me up. He was like, hey man, I just threw a jig out there deep on a hard spot, you know? And I was like, yeah, you know, I might try that. So we're gonna kind of pick up on basically Tuesday, because Sunday and Monday I really just fished the grass. Tuesday I went out there, and it was so cold that morning. It was like 23. My compartments were frozen over, right? And there's a rule in there, you have to wear your life jacket to crank your motor. And I couldn't even get my life jacket out. So I just dropped the boat in, put the trolling motor on, and took off and just started fishing. And I got out to pretty much the main lake, or the main river, and there was a little flat little point on there. But at this point in time, I really wasn't driving around looking for these perfect spots. I was just kind of fishing what was in front of me. So I picked up a Carolina rig, and right off the bat, man, I started dragging it out in front of the grass, and I hit these hard spots. And I mean, it was instant. As soon as I hit the hard spot, I got bit. And it felt like a small one. And I throw it back out there, and same thing, got bit, felt like a small one. I shook it off, you know. And about the 3rd time, I'm like, God, these are really small. So I set the hook, and it wasn't a keeper. It might have been a 12-incher. But it was every cast, every single cast. And I'm like, okay, hey, if nothing else, there's a great way to catch 12-inch spots to go along with all these grass fish. So I do that for a while, and I go back to grass fishing a little bit and throwing around, but I just keep on throwing that Carolina rig, and I didn't throw it on points, I just started throwing it down the bank because I still couldn't get my rod boxes open. So I just started doing what I kind of do sometimes, and sometimes instead of graphing, instead of doing any of this, I'll just throw that Carolina rig around. And I got up next to another little area, almost to a point. Now this is important, almost to the point. And I throw over there and I feel a hard spot. I don't get bit on it, but I feel one. And I'm like, oh, I bet you it's hard all the way around here. These hard spots are gonna be huge. And like 2 casts later, nothing. I get almost all the way around to the point, and now I barely got bit again. As I'm going around the point, I really don't get bit on the point until I get right past the point a little bit, kind of on the point, but the point was a big point. So these hard spots weren't everywhere. And I got bit finally when I got around there and felt a little bit of hardness, and I was like, okay, there's another bite. There's another little island right next to me. I went and fished it, got bit on one side where it was hard, got bit on the other side where it was hard. And then I started going forever down this one bank, and nothing. And then I kind of went flipping a little bit and got a bite or two flipping, which kept me on a flipping bite. I hadn't got a flipping bite yet. And as soon as I got bit flipping, I went around this boat dock and there was nothing more to flip. So I threw my rig out there, and the point's right on up there. Like, that's where it looks the best. But my first cast, I got bit. So I throw back out there, second cast, get bit. Third cast, get bit. And I'm not throwing in the same spot. I'll throw here, and then I'll move like 20, 30 feet. So I'm pretty far away from where I got bit and get another bite and another bite. And I'm like, dang. And I get to the point, and it's really not that hard on the point. It was harder where I was at on the side of it. Same deal. I had a bite, one bite on the point, went past the point, had another bite, felt another little bit of hard stuff. Kept doing it a little bit more, got to another point, got bit. You catch my drift, right? I'm just going. And then I'll go a long time without feeling any hard spots, and I also don't get any bites. But I'm like, if I find a hard spot, even if I don't get bit on it, I feel like there's one there. I'd say I get bit out of 2/3 of the hard spots I hit. I have all these areas, and I'm like, man, I've had like 20 something bites today. And I still haven't even cranked the motor. I've had 4 or 5 bites flipping. And when I started flipping was just anything on the bank, anything. I really didn't care. It was just whatever looked good in front of me. And that's how my practice went, guys. I decided right then and there, I'm not running all over this place. I'm not. I'm gonna sit down, fish what's in front of me. There's enough good stuff in front of me. I know nothing about this place. I don't know if I'm in a good area, a bad area. I looked at the map, and it's the same thing with like Neely Henry. The further north you went, the more it turned into a river. The further south you went, the more it turned into more of a lake. And right where I was at were 2 of the biggest creeks on the lake. And what I mean by biggest, they were big and fat. They were flat, and they had islands, and they had grass everywhere and little creeks off of them. And the river turned, and there's just a lot going on right there. I said, man, this is a pretty good 3 or 4 mile section of the river. Might not even be that long. There's enough to fish here. Like, I don't need to go everywhere else. So I just kept on staying in there. And as I'm doing this, I start fishing the grass more and more, and I stop getting less and less bites. And it starts bothering me. And there was two things going on. One, we had these massive cold front come through. And all these people, and I'm not gonna say this a lot of guys were talking about like, these fish aren't gonna bite very good shallow. I just didn't believe that because of the time of the year we were there. We were there early winter. And when I mean that, like, we're early December. And I just go back from my experience on Rayburn, is that usually when it gets really cold like that, even if it's early December, it doesn't affect the fish. Now if it gets early January, oh, it's like night and day. Like, they shut off like crazy. But in December, they don't. So I'm just hoping that this lake is just like Rayburn, and the fact that, yeah, I know it's going to get cold and the temperature is going to drop, but I think they're still going to bite. So this kind of carries over onto day 3 now, which is our last day of practice. And I go back out there and I just do everything. I fish the grass, I go throw that rig around, and as I'm throwing that rig around, I'm getting more and more bites. You know, I don't find as many places, but I do get a bite almost on every place that's semi-right. I then just drive around the lake and look for grass. And I'll touch up on the grass here in a second. But as I'm doing the Carolina rig deal, I get to this island, and I fished all over the grass around the island, and I find a little hard spot and get bit first cast, and I left it alone. I really thought it was a sneaky spot. there's another obvious point. I'm like, everyone's gonna hit it. I went to hit and I threw on it. And I had already kind of thought that this Carolina rig was getting a lot of bites. And it was getting a lot of bites when I think it almost seemed like it was the best thing to throw, even though I hadn't really thrown anything else, like a jig, Ned rig, anything on the bottom. It just, usually when something's so good, it's hard for something else to be better. And it just felt like I was getting a lot of bites. I did not think they were big ones, but I didn't know. I was shaking them all off. There was no reason to catch them. I didn't care because I thought all my big ones were going to come out of the grass if I could catch some. So when I get to this point, I throw on this point, and it's every cast. And I pick up my Ned rig, and I'm like, let's try it out. So I break out a Ned rig, throw it out there, and I have to drag this thing for like 5 minutes before I finally get a bite. And I did. I got a bite on the first cast, and then the same deal. The next cast, I had to drag it forever, and I finally get another bite. I'm like, well, I'll bite this thing too. I reached down and picked up that Carolina rig and threw it out there, and it went in there for 10 seconds, and I got bit. Throw back out there, 10 seconds, got bit, and I'm like, this thing's better. Like, the Carolina rig is the deal. It's the best dragging bait, in my opinion, that's going on right now for whatever reason. So now we've got like 10 minutes left in practice, and I just start idling. I see a couple more spots. I'll show you on the map. I start idling to these other spots to look at them. I'll kind of explain why I thought certain spots were better. And as I'm going there, and it's a subtle little deal, and I see 2 fish on the screen, and I hadn't idled. I have not graphed or side imaged anything since I've been there. And I got to the spot where I was going, and it looked right, and I marked it. I never made a cast on. Practice was over. That's my Carolina rig deal. The grass deal I hadn't figured out. I got bit, but it was so random. And I talked to some locals around there that were fishing the event. You know, we're just over there getting our stuff ready, and I kind of knew them a little bit. We were just talking like in generalities about the grass fishing on that lake. I'm like, man. And they were explaining that they weren't going to go grass fish either, because they say it should be good, but it was so random. It was so, you couldn't go back and get bit on the same spot. They missed it a lot. I mean, it just wasn't that good. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. Because I would get bit, but where I might get bit in the back of a creek, I might get bit more close to the river. I could go 2 hours without getting a bite, 3. They weren't always big. It just didn't feel good, and I couldn't figure out. I knew there was something about the grass fish. I knew something was going on with it, but I couldn't dial it in. I could not, I couldn't feel comfortable where I'm like, when I see it, that's it. Here's the things I figured out about it. Too much grass was too much. Like, if you got an area with so much grass, it was hard to get a bite. You could get a bite, but you could usually only get one in like an hour or two. If you got around more isolated stuff, you could get bit. If you could get bit there, I think it was going to be, you had a better chance of figuring that out. The problem is when you went and tried to do this, it seemed like, when I started realizing there were sections of the river that were good and sections that weren't, and I had no way to figure that out. I couldn't figure out why certain sections were. The one thing I'll say is, when I first got there, in the section I was in, I had 2 or 3 bites in this creek, one on the outside of it over here, one on the outside of it here, and as I started getting further and further away from that area, I got less and less bites. And I mean, guys, this take you days upon days upon days to go cover, you know, a tenth of that lake in the grass. And I knew the morning bite was semi better. I knew clouds were going to be better. The sun made it way harder, but you could get bit better flipping. And I thought the flipping bite was getting better as the swim jig bite was getting worse. But all we had leading up to that event was, other than the first day of clouds, was the sun. And then the first day was supposed to be cloudy, and day 2 is supposed to be like nasty and rainy cloudy. So the flipping bite was going to get worse, and the swim jig bite might get better, but it's getting cold, and like all these things are going through all of our heads of going, how are we supposed to make this work? You know, like everything's going to be changing once again. So I know I'm going to go do it, but this Carolina rig bite's gotten so good. I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's go Carolina rig fish, catch some fish, and I'll go do this for the rest of the day. Well, I start off that morning, and let me tell you something, guys. When I say the Carolina rig bite's so easy, For me, it was like I had like 15 spots where if I didn't get bit on the first cast, something was like wrong. So I go to my first spot and I throw around and nothing. I go to the second spot and I get bit and I set the hook and I think it was a big one. Probably the only fish I lost. I don't know. I bowed up and it come off like instantly. And I'm like, that's weird. And then I fished a long time. And I finally got to one other spot and got bit and caught one. And I started watching guys in the tournament. Here they come. They start hitting all these points. And I know they're throwing jerk baits, right? I'd already heard that the jerk bait bite is the deal there. And I just never even threw one in practice. So I see them start hitting these points that I'm hitting, but my spots are a little bit different than their spots. So I start catching a fish here and there, and I started just catching these, keepers. And I didn't care. I'm like, let me get my 5, and I'm going straight to the grass. And this is going on, but I'm getting bit, so I kind of stay with it a little bit longer. And it's like 9:30, and I said, hey man, I got this spot I never really cast on. Let me go throw on these 2 spots, see what it's like. I get to the first one, miss one, throw my jerk bait out there because I rigged the jerk bait up. I'll try it. Caught one, missed one on the jerk bait. My coiling lure catches a pretty good one, and I'm like, all right. And I go to the next spot. I just trolling motor over there. It's right there. I don't know what it's like. My first cast there was a big one, and I'm like, hey, that's like a big one. Like I can catch some big ones on this Carolina rig. Second cast, another big one, and I'm like, oh man. So I go past a little ways, catch another pretty good one. I turn around and I break out my little rage swimmer, and the rage swimmer deal was pretty cool. I didn't get to do it much in the tournament. This is probably the one thing I would change if I went back there. 2 things. This is the first thing I changed. This is one of the things I learned. I had too big of a swim bait on there. I changed on day 2. I was in a barred boat. I didn't pack everything in there. I'd only had a bite or 2 in practice on that. So I really wasn't planning on throwing it. And I don't like throwing that thing when you have to reel it slow this time of year. I know fish want to eat more of a fast bait. And as I was reeling it in, I caught one. And if you notice, my next cast after that, I just start reeling it and letting it drop when reeling it real fast, and one bit it. And it was my biggest one of day 1. It was like over a 3-pounder. There was another big one with it. I think my coiling lure ended up catching it like 2 or 3 casts later. He threw a DT6 out there. And I think that fish just got close to the boat and swam around out there, and I think he ended up catching it because he caught one over 3. So now I'm like, man, there's a bunch of big ones on this spot. No one's hitting it. I've been watching it. No one hit it in 2 days. So now I'm sitting here going, well, man, do I go fish the grass, or do I kind of keep doing what I'm doing because I'm kind of catching them pretty good? And I was like, man, I'm here for one thing, man. Let's just go try to win this thing. It wasn't as cloudy as it was supposed to be. The sun was kind of out. So I went through the swim jig, guys, and I threw it. And I threw it on places where I thought that I'm like, hey, I'm really only looking for one fish, one big one. And I had one bite, maybe 2. I caught one of them. It was a 13-incher in like 4 hours. I'd throw the rig around a little bit, but I really was just like, 1 4-pounder is going to go a long ways. And I didn't catch it. And I did pretty good on day 1. On day 2, if you notice, I go right to that spot where those big ones were. And I was ready for them, right? I was ready for everything to play out. I had my small swim baits. I had some crankbaits on. I had everything rigged up. 3 or 4 casts in, I'll never get a bite. And I'm going, shouldn't be like this. Like I already knew. Here's the things that, man, when you really feel like you're on it. This is the stuff that you have to listen to in your gut, in your head, guys. So pay attention to this. I fished for 4 hours on day 1 and basically never caught a fish in the grass. I'd probably caught 20 to 25 fish on a Carolina rig. On day 2, I roll up to throw a Carolina rig. I make 3 casts, and I'm looking at that grass and looking at the weather going, go to the grass. And it's crazy. I had no fish, and I'm like, just go to the grass. Go to that creek where I'd had a bite or 2 in, and let's just go see. And so I did, man. I said, man, I don't care anymore. Let's just go. It just felt right. And it's crazy to think that you would get nothing on the day before, and to have so much confidence to be like, nope, this is what I should be doing. I love that, man. I love that feeling. And I felt it. When I went down there and I ended up catching my biggest one, it was one almost 4 pounds. I had another big one miss. and I ended up kind of just catching 2 more because I just put my head down with a swim jig and caught 2 more. And then I kind of picked up the Carolina rig and started just fishing like I did in practice, where when I got close to a Carolina rig spot, I'd throw the Carolina rig, and I ended up catching some, and then I'd flip, and I caught some fish. And as I was coming back around, there was this one spot on the side of this point that I never felt like I hit on day 1 that good. I went up there in my first cast on it. I caught like a 3.5 pound large spot. It was my biggest spot of the event. And then from there, it was like, all right, let's go Carolina rig a little bit. And we'd Carolina rig a little bit, and we'd fish some grass. And this kind of went on, but there was almost no one in my area anymore. All the guys that had fished my area on day 1, they left like that. I guess they didn't catch them that good. So I had a lot of this stuff to myself. So I was really relaxed and just went fishing again. And I kept everything honest. So I'd keep some Carolina rig fish honest, and I'd go up there and I'm like, let's go through that creek one more time with that swim jig to catch 1 fish. And I went through it again, and I ended up catching another one here. I ended up getting bites on some of that hard stuff where I never got bit in practice. I fished it on day 2, got bit. Fished some grass and never got bit unpracticed, and got bit and caught some. And I was always culling. Nothing big, but I was always culling up. And I really didn't think I had that much weight, but it ended up being a lot more than I thought. And as this day's going on, there was 1 fish in practice on this point of grass. And it was in that same creek. And I got to that spot, and I literally made the exact same cast I did in practice. And one blew up on it, and I caught it. And I was like, dang it. And there was also a fish, that spotted bass I'd caught earlier in the day was in the exact same, within about 2 foot of another spot where I'd got bit. And I'm like, oh no, what if, I don't know much about how they fish this hay around there. What if it was that, I wouldn't say easy, but what if it was that there were certain little spots in that grass that did hold fish? There was, because I caught 2 doing that. My biggest one of the entire practice or whatever was 1/4 in this one little grass stretch. I went and hit it with about 3 minutes left in the tournament. If you see on my day 2, it doesn't show me catch a fish there, but y'all see me, I'll run to a spot, fish one little spot, and then I leave. That same cast, I mean, it was crazy. It was about a 50-yard stretch of grass, the same cast where I caught that 4, another one. I don't think it was a big one, but it blew up on the exact, within like a foot of the other one. When I say blew up, you could see it swirl. And I was going, oh man, okay. So that's number 2. That's the second thing I would have changed. I didn't realize that those fish, I think, were using exact spots in that grass. I know that now. That was the other thing I would have changed. The other thing is, that swim bait, I think I would have changed to a smaller swim bait, and I think I could have caught more of them on it. I caught 1 or 2 on day 2 on it, on the real small one. Those are the 2 things I would have changed. But that's my event, guys. That was so awesome to see what happened in practice kind of stay true for the most part, right? The Carolina rig, the bite never got worse. The grass bite was really there. It was just real temperamental. And so, but I figured out when it was temperamental, when it wasn't. And I figured out that some of my places might have been better than I realized. And instead of just keep on fishing new water, I think I just needed to rotate some of that water a little bit more. And that's just, like on day 3, I would have been jacked up to fish day 3 because I think I knew how the system was working at that point in time. So that's it. Let's go to the map. I kind of call this old school fishing, okay? This is old school juice. And here's why. I rolled down there, right, to go fish grass, so I didn't even buy a mapping system, right, a map card for this deal. I went down there, throwing a Carolina rig, and just to go visually see what's in front of me and fish it. I think it helped me because I didn't really get dialed in. I just threw around and fished around and wasn't trying to drive all over the place. And what happened was I ended up finding these little bitty obscure areas that had fish in them. Maybe just 1 or 2. Maybe they weren't the best areas. Maybe the point had 20 fish on it in practice, okay? And as guys, every day in practice, I'd see them hit these points. I'm sure they're catching fish. Well, those 20 turned down to almost nothing. And then there's a spot over here 3 casts away that no one ever cast on. And maybe it's got 3 fish in practice, but no one ever cast on them. So those 3 fish are still there. Like, they still use that area. And it's like all my places were like that. And I found them from just old school fishing, not maps, not you know, a spot or something. It's just me just casting around and finding stuff. And that Carolina rig helped me determine what was on the bottom and what wasn't. And that's a lot of times why I throw it. So, but yeah, let's look at the map, guys. I did have a different boat, okay? So I'm gonna look. So I'm gonna see if this map is the same. Okay, it looks just the same. This is where I'd put in every day, okay? So here's lay. There's lay. And this is where I'd put in every day. And I'd idle around here. And like I said, I mean, you can see there's not many contours, right? But I did like this area because there was this one big creek. There was just one big creek, and it made a couple turns, right? It definitely looks different when you get down here. It looks the same from about here to here. And then as you get closer up the river, you know, it turns more into a river. So I was like, man, this is a pretty good looking. This right here looks to me the best. It has everything you want to hit, right? It has good backwaters. It has good rivers, has these islands. So, and there was a lot of grass. So I was like, oh, let's stay with that. Had a bunch of boat docks. Just had a bunch of stuff on it. Well, as I came out of here, I would just started fishing all this grass, right? And this whole thing was grass, man. There was grass all back in there. And basically I just came out of here and fished all this the first day I got there. On day 2, I kind of did the same thing, but kind of went over here and kind of went over here, just kind of messed around in different little areas, anywhere where I could see grass. Now, the other day I started Carolina rigging, I just kind of started rigging around this point, like right here. And you can tell that this is the map I had, guys. This isn't anything special, right? I mean, there's no contour, one line difference, but you can see little points, right? You can see little points, and little high spots, points. I mean, there's just the little bitty little points. Well, I got bit here and here and here and here. And this is when I kind of knew, when I got to this point, this point looks awesome. That's where everyone was fishing. But I got bit right here on this point. And I know when I call points, I'm not really talking about the brown line. I'm talking about this lighter blue line. But that point actually right there did have some fish on it. And no one hit that right there. And the same thing about this little point, right? Everyone hit this, everyone's gonna hit this, but no one hit there. And like I said, this was like one of the most hit spot on the lakes, right? Right here. I could get bit right here, and then I got bit right here. And so all these little points, anywhere where this river channel hit some of these points, I was getting bit. Well, I mean, that's what I started realizing. And I eventually went over, I could even do it over here. You know, I would find somewhere on there would be a hard spot, somewhere on this little point. And these islands right here, I found a little hard spot right there and right there. And there's some stuff out here. And I just started, it was later on in the day, I probably could have found more stuff like it, but I had enough stuff to hit. So that's kind of what I was focusing on. I came up here and tried it in these blue circles. Those are stumps, trees that were sticking out of the water. And a lot of those trees, man, it was kind of hard to fish around them. I'm sure they held fish for jerk baiting and stuff, but for Carolina rigging, and it just got harder and harder to find these definite spots. I guarantee I could have done it right here. Like I said, I had enough over here to fish. And as I went down the lake, if you notice, that flatter stuff disappears, okay? I do know if you got down here at the bottom of the lake, I did come down here and practice one time. It has a little bit more of those flatter stuff. And I could have done the same thing down there, like guaranteed it would have been on. And I don't know if you hear me in the tournament video, I think on day 1 saying, God, I wonder if I should just go down there. Like, and just start fishing new stuff. I had enough confidence to hit all brand new stuff because I knew what I was looking for. But that's what I did. The grass stuff became tough because there was grass like all down these banks everywhere. And I just kept on thinking, and a lot of us did, that these areas like this with all this grass were really going to play. But really what happens is they would get in these creeks. They would get in some of these little sections, and you might get 4 bites here and 2 bites here, and then nothing, and nothing over here. And man, I everywhere I got bit, I started realizing it was less grass. What I mean by that, it wasn't just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards of grass. It might be little sections of grass, right? There might be a little section of grass here and section of grass here, and it wasn't so much that it was overwhelming. When you're gonna fish that way, it sounds simple, right? But you know, going into it, you're going to have to pick something and stay with it for a long time. And so that's kind of what I did. I stuck with the Carolina rig a long time. And if you picked up that swim jig or that flipping bait, you're gonna have to do it a while to get bit. Like, you couldn't just hope to get bit somewhere. You knew you're gonna have to put your head down. And so I started just saying, hey, let's put my head down in some of these places where I've had multiple bites, and there were not many of them. So it kind of made it easy. But that's it, guys. That's my lake breakdown. It was a really cool place. It was probably the coolest place I've been. I really enjoyed it. I think it has a lot of fish, and it was one of the coolest places too, because you catch fish doing a lot of different things. I would have loved to have gone. Like, I wanted to stay there another day. I messed up. I needed 1 fish out of the grass on day 1, and I make the cut. And I think I would have caught it if I'd have started in the grass on day 1, doing it for at least an hour. I think I would have caught one, no doubt. The reason I didn't, and if anyone knows me from the past, everyone knows that, like, I'm kind of a guy that, like, leaves it all out there. Like, I don't care about limits. I don't care about any of that stuff. But I've gotten so tired of this year and going to these lakes where, like, it was so hard to catch the limit. It was always a grind. That I was like, I don't want it to be another one of those. I'll better go get my limit. It's probably why on day 2, I was like, I'm gonna catch them. Let's go after it. But I just didn't want to start off with myself in a big hole. You know, do I regret it? No. It's just something I wish I could have done different. I'd been so used to some of these tournaments where, you know, you get bit in practice and you kind of looking forward to it, and then it gets harder. So, you know, this time of the year we fish aren't really coming to us. You know, in the springtime, a lot of times they're always coming to you, so there's more and more of them. So it's better. But that's little things. It's little things you learn, or, you know, you always have not necessarily regrets, but things you look back on you could have done different. I had very little things I would have done different in this event. It turned out pretty good. So that's it, guys. Get ready for 2021. I'm introducing something new for 2021. I'm excited about it. Probably going to get to see it all year long. So that'll be pretty cool. Anyways, guys, I hope you all have some good holidays. Get ready, guys. 2021, I think it's going to be a good one, guys. We'll see y'all.